Share screen. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you see my, okay, cool. I'm Ryan Kmetz. Thank you guys for the lovely introduction. Please feel free to put questions in the chat. And if I did my timing correctly, we should have a little bit of time towards the end for an open forum as well. So this is an adaptation of something that was presented at the 21 ASHI / JICSHI, I don't know how to say that part, conference. And I'm really excited and thrilled to be here with everybody today. So just a very quick overview. We're going to talk about facilities management and sustainability and some of the things that are synergistic between the two of them, and kind of how to help facilities people understand what sustainability people are trying to say and vice versa, because we actually are, most of us, working towards the same goal, just sometimes we're using different dictionaries and thesauruses. So I'm going to actually take you guys through I call it a base case example. In reality, I just took some buildings at UMBC and called them ABC. But we're going to talk about deferred maintenance, total cost of ownership, scoping a project, risk management, and then I'm actually going to talk to you guys also about an example of a facilities and sustainability intercampus collaboration in the greater Baltimore area, and something that we're working on real time, present today, related to composting and organic waste. And UMBC has 6 green roofs, and here's a picture of one of them. So overall, like I mentioned, I really want to help everybody understand what these 4 really important terms mean and how it relates to all the sustainability folks, how it relates to you, but also how you can talk to the facilities folks about it, and vice versa, so that we're all talking the same language and hopefully all understanding. We're all working towards the same mission. It's just nice if we all understand what each other is trying to say. And then just a great example of collaboration and just the power that we can leverage in the community when we all come together and communicate effectively. So here's the base case. As I told you, it's nothing fancy. So for the purposes of this discussion, we're just going to pretend that this could be your campus anywhere, where we have 5 buildings and they were built in the 1970s. We'll just assume it's 500,000 square feet, and that 3 buildings are academic and 2 buildings are residential. So then we're also going to think about, okay, the last time that there was any significant maintenance or upgrades was sometime in the 1990s. And I'm sure most of you on this call can relate, because that's probably very close to what you're dealing with. And you have a really good master plan, and it's going to get rid of one of those academic buildings sometime in the next decade, probably 5 to 8 years. And then all the buildings in this example are on your central plant loop for heating and chilled hot water. For those of you who don't understand what that means, it means that the central plant has all the boilers and the giant chillers and just puts out pipes. They make a big circle and the pipes stop at every single building. That's a very simplified way to describe it. So this is where some of the sustainability folks sometimes are like, oh, I don't want to listen to this, or, I'm trying to get it so that everyone kind of understands it. I understand that not all sustainability people are engineers and technically minded, but sometimes it helps if you have a little bit of interest, or at least feign some, in kind of what the technical engineers and architects are talking about. So for this example, we're just saying each building has 2 air handlers. VAVs, if you are just starting in sustainability, VAV is variable air volume. It's a way that you manage your HVAC. Hot water reheat is just once again, a HVAC term. Look these things up. It's good to get to know what they mean, so that when you're in a meeting, and you hear, oh, well, we installed new VAVs, you're not like, what? Um, Interior lighting, I have mostly Super T8s. So those are the tube lights, they're fluorescents. Back in the probably late 90s, early aughts, everything was moving from T12s to T8s or Super T8s. And then they went to T4s. And now today, you see a lot of folks installing LEDs. Exterior lighting or metal halides. If you don't know what that is, they're usually pretty big light bulbs. They're usually what you'll see in like a parking lot at night. And they're the ones that change lots of fun colors when they're dying. You may have seen them in a gymnasium growing up as well. They take forever to turn on, and one's purple, one's blue, one's white. And for this example, we're just going to say the three of the buildings still have their original roof. You'll see why I decided to say that it's tar and gravel built up. And in that case, it's just tar paper, hot asphalt, gravel, and you build up layers to create a waterproof roof. And then I talked once again about that building that's going to get torn down. And just so that we have a general idea of what we're talking about here, remember 500,000 square feet at approximately $1.10 for your electricity. So your annual electricity cost is just over $500,000, and you'll see why that's important. So the EIA is the Energy Information Administration, and every so often, I think it's actually due this year, the update, I think it's every 10 years, they will do a national assessment to profile buildings. So since the majority of folks on this call are coming from universities, we're in the commercial building sector. Not residential. And so EIA, they broke down in 2012 exactly where energies are going at buildings. So what's really important here to take away is 25% of your typical building's energy consumption is actually coming from space heating. Lighting in 2012 was 10%. My guess is if we did this today, lighting would be closer to 7 or 8%, just because LEDs have become so adopted since then. But you'll notice you have ventilation, cooling, refrigeration. All of these things are systems either within the building or in your plant that there might be some opportunities to discover some low-hanging fruit to increase efficiency. So if you're a newer sustainability person on the call, you're probably thinking, what does that matter? Well, if we can measure what we're using and use it as efficiently as possible, we're going to use less energy, and less energy then hopefully, well, it does translate to less emissions unless you do something crazy and turn your lights on 24/7. But what we're trying to do is think in a system and think of a cause and effect and how it's going to relate. So facilities professional, they like the idea of better use of efficiency and less energy on their air handling equipment, because hopefully that means that air handler is turning on and off less. Because every time you turn off and on, you have to move there's mechanical energy, move belts and whatnot, and parts eventually wear out. But if everything's being utilized as efficiently as possible, maybe at the end of the day, you've bought an extra couple of days cumulative for that equipment, as opposed to having to send somebody to fix it every 3 months. So I really want to encourage people to think about everything as a big system as we go through this. So deferred maintenance, I'm sure most people on the call have heard about deferred maintenance. To put it very simply, it's money that you didn't spend and you put off fixing something. I won't read the definitions to everybody, but in the facilities world, there's the APA organization, and all the facilities folks will be very familiar with APA. And in sustainability, as everybody on the call knows, there's lots of different resources there. So I actually pulled that definition out of the US Geological Survey's federal manual for deferred maintenance. And I just wanted to illustrate what it is. So you'll see on the top picture, there's two windows. They're just before and after shots. You'll see the one window is probably single pane glass. That's definitely a wood sash around it. The paint's peeling. Unfortunately, the picture's not too good, but if it has like alligator scales on it, it's lead paint. And then you'll see on the after picture, you have a nice brand new window. It's probably vinyl. I bet you it's double paned, or if efficiency is a really important thing at that institution, it's triple paned. And also the glass has something called an emissivity factor. So you might have heard of a low E window. So you went from windows that probably didn't have that to windows that now do. And what that is that's a great example of not only did you beautify it, you fixed a leaky window that it might be water leaky, it's definitely air leaky. And then if it is lead paint, you also removed an environmental hazard. In the picture down below, same type of concept. It's a hallway. You see the old hallway there with probably the old Super T8s. It's kind of dark. It looks a little dingy. You'll see on the after photo, exact same hallway. They exploded out the ceiling. They put in new cable runs, and now they have LED lights. Fairly low project, I would imagine, but they're able to fix some stuff. And you'll notice now that the ceiling is open in the new picture, which probably means that they were able to get to some mechanical or plumbing equipment. Now you don't have to cut a hole into the ceiling to fix that. So thinking of that on a sustainability point of view, okay, now you don't need to rip out all this drywall and create construction waste. So you just eliminated waste to the landfill. And as we all know, reduction of waste is much better than recycling the waste, because if there's no waste to send, then you don't have to worry about all the emissions associated with the recycling. So when we talk about deferred maintenance, it's typically stuff that it's not a disaster if it doesn't get fixed, but it needs to eventually be fixed. So lots of times you think of the building envelope, so your windows, your doors, or even pipes coming in and out of buildings. Usually they have little gaskets or foam around them. That stuff breaks down over time. Roofing systems, it's going to depend on how long. Different roof types have different life cycles. So everybody's familiar with your house's shingles. Your average house shingle is about 20 to 25 years. That's an asphalt shingle. But for those that may have grown up in the Midwest or more rural areas, you probably know of houses that have metal roofs, and those roofs are typically 50 to 75 years. And then you can go in Europe to the absolute extreme, the clay roofs, which in some cases were put up in the 1600s and are still there today and functioning just the way they should. For HVAC, that's going to be your fans, your pumps, your sensors, and then lighting. It's fixtures, just where you put the light bulb, and controls can be as simple as a light switch or as complex as a controller that will dim the lights to a certain level at a certain time, depending on if it feels or sees somebody's motion. Really, all I'm trying to get at is the energy conservation pyramid. Conservation is typically the easiest thing to do and the cheapest. Efficiency, so in this case, that's some sort of technology. Sometimes it's very easy, sometimes it requires a little more effort, and the cost goes up, and then you have alternatives. And so back to the window thought process, you could have just installed a plexiglass barrier on the window to help stop the air penetration. You're doing a little bit of conservation. It's definitely the cheapest and easiest. However, if you were to go to the other extreme and you take the whole window out and put in a triple pane vinyl window, you've upped the complexity a little bit and the cost a lot of it. So it's really just trying to think of all that when you hear deferred maintenance, and see where there are opportunities to at least target that efficiency area if it's appropriate. So once again, back to our cool little example here. What I want to do is just show everybody some projects that every campus deals with on a regular basis. So ECM is an energy conservation measure. And roof replacement really isn't an ECM, but it just made the chart look nicer. And so what I have there, the X's indicate some of the examples here. Our X's mean that we did it. So in this case, we did 4 buildings with LED retrofits. And once again, this is fictitious. 4 buildings with HVAC. Only the residential buildings got building envelope treatment, and roof replacement was needed on 2 of the buildings. And then I extrapolated out total costs, and those were really based on kind of national averages and the savings. And as you can see, the LEDs pay for themselves really fast, whereas stuff like a roof replacement really doesn't pay for itself super fast, but it's usually something that's needed. And envelope is almost always going to be a loser, just because it's a slow payback. But in some cases, like the lead paint example, you're able to remove an environmental hazard and make it look better. And if they're your flagship res halls, you know, that's very important when you have students and their families touring through. So I just, like I said, want to give that example. And you're probably like, why is the one building, building B, nothing, in academic building B, nothing's happening? Well, if you remember back to that master plan, I said academic building B was going to go away. So you don't want to have huge capital expenses on its deferred maintenance if the building is going to be torn down and replaced. You don't want to totally ignore the building. You need to make sure that it's still working. But if you can eke out another 5 years on its roof, then you don't need to go spend the amount of money on a roof that you would, since the building's going to be torn down. It's not going to be refurbished. So now I would like to talk about the total cost of ownership. So from a facilities point of view, that's essentially how much money do we need to design it, operate it, build it, replace it, and eventually get rid of it. In the sustainability world, it's just really thinking of everything's a resource for something else. So you think about how can this be repurposed or reused or safely disassembled. So that might be, you know, you're looking at a wood structure or low VOC paints and adhesives. A lot of stuff LEED is trying to look at is trying to get to the sustainability thought process of it. And the little diagram on the screen is the asset information model, and that's from APA. And once again, it's just describing kind of what's going on, what this looks like from kind of a facilities management point of view. Is you need to understand where the costs are coming. So there's that big cost at first to build it, then you pay money to keep it running. Utilities, you have to have gas and electricity. Renewal, in this case, think of that deferred maintenance idea. That's every once in a while, you got to go in and fix it, just like your car. Every once in a while, you have to go change the oil, change out the spark plugs. If you have an electric vehicle, I don't have one, so I don't know what the recommended maintenance is, but I guarantee you there is some. And like your brakes, for instance. And then at the end of it, how do you properly dispose of it? And kind of going back to that car example, okay, if the car is steel, the steel can be recycled. What do we do with those lithium ion batteries for electric vehicles? What do we do with the lead acid batteries for traditional vehicles? And are there alternatives that are nicer to the environment, so to speak? And so really, I found this great infographic here from the federal government that is trying to show both the human environmental cost versus just the costs. And it's really that paradigm shift of trying to understand the whole system, and not just looking at what is the best bang for the buck to build this building, especially if you are at an institution where sustainability is a very important core part of the mission. you don't want to just build a cheap building and then claim you're being sustainable, because then you'll get accused of greenwashing. And part of the reason too why I like this chart graphic here is it actually shows you some standards and methodology. And it's showing that if you just look at the kind of the traditional costing method, it's based on a formula. It's prescriptive, meaning if X, do Y. Whereas as we move forward and start looking at environmental and other human health aspects of buildings and design and construction, you're getting away from those formulas. You're starting to think a little bit more kind of that high level with the systems thought process and trying to understand both upstream and downstream emissions. But once again, you have to apply it where it makes sense. There are just some buildings that no matter what you do, it's going to be a utilitarian building. A great example is a pump station if you have a pump station on campus. You can build it to a standard where you reduce the footprint as much as possible, but at the end of the day, the building serves a purpose, and that's to make sure that the pump turns on so your campus doesn't flood. Whereas you might look at a residence hall or a new science building very, very differently. So I used for an example here the total cost of ownership for roofing. So for those of you that have never seen a built-up roof, the top picture is a built-up roof, and that's that layer of basically tar paper and hot asphalt and gravel. If you've ever seen Shawshank Redemption, the roof scene, that's kind of what they're doing. And then on the bottom picture, you see a newer roof. It's basically a rubber roof, and it's a white or light gray, and it's to increase the reflectivity or albedo. And so that actually helps the building so a black roof, as we all know, is going to absorb heat. A white roof is going to reflect it. And it actually will help reduce some of your overall equipment costs because the building stays a little bit cooler. So there's a cool chart over here. I won't go into it, but I'm more than happy to provide anybody who's interested in the specifics of it, where they actually compare the total cost of ownership for a premium black asphalt roof compared to a premium white roofing membrane. And as you'll see, over 20 years, in a perfect world, the white roofing membrane is significantly less cost than the asphalt roof. Why is that? They're assuming that the asphalt roof only lasts 10 to 12 years and has to be replaced again. So that's why that delta in cost is so huge. Once again, this is a kind of a national average, and this does not speak necessarily for your building, because I know somebody probably on the call has an example where it's actually the inverse. But this is a general kind of idea and study. And as everybody knows, when we come up with theoretical ideas, there's always an anomaly. So project scope. Most of us probably know what scope means. It's basically, what are you going to do in a project? What's the amount of time that you say the project's going to be done? And what's the quality? So milestones and phases. From the sustainability perspective, it's actually expanding that definition and going just from talking about, okay, I know that I have to have this building built by 2023, which means in February, we need to pour the foundation. By July, we need to be starting to install interior stuff. By November, we need to start getting ready for commissioning the building, which means making sure all the systems are working properly and people can move in. But from a sustainability perspective, it's also talking about, okay, what can we do to reduce all the various impacts associated with the project? Are there opportunities to reuse stuff on site that now we don't have to necessarily send it to the landfill or dispose of it? A great example of that we've used at my university at UMBC is we recently put in some new power feeders through the heart of campus, and a lot of it had to go under walkways. So we were actually able to, it was a little more time intensive, but we pulled off all the brick pavers so that we could do the trenching and put in the new feeders. And I'd say about 75% of the brick pavers were able to be reused. Some broke, some didn't make it, but we thought about kind of what the impact was. So instead of carting off dump truck loads of brick pavers that were basically fine and buying new ones, we only bought a small sample of new ones to make them fit. That being said, we were very lucky in that they had the same design and color. You might not get that lucky. But it's really about just thinking beyond just, I have to get X done by Y, and really thinking, how can I approach it from a systems thought process, from a whole life cycle, and minimize the impact every step of the way. So here is basically a very traditional way that projects are scoped. It's a nice little graphic, but usually the project idea comes up, and then the stakeholders get together and you figure out the budget. You kind of get an estimate, then you actually go into the design phase, then the construction phase, and eventually the closeout phase. And there's several different ways to do it. I won't get into it, but this is just so everybody has a very basic understanding of how that actually works. Whereas when we think about the sustainability phase, as you'll see in the first little square, you're just the traditional project management. You're really looking at getting the project done and coming in on time and on budget. Modern project management, so project management has evolved over the past 20, 25 years, so that you're actually talking to stakeholders. You're trying to build that something that will match kind of the mission or vision of the organization. A little more management involved as opposed to just a foreman doing a back of the envelope calculation. And then moving towards sustainable project management, that's understanding, okay, what's the impact today? What's the impact in, say, my city? And then what's the impact of my design choices for tomorrow's generations? And, maybe putting exotic wood panels throughout the building is not the best idea, because that means that we're tearing down forests globally, and the emissions related to getting those materials to us. Or, maybe a great example is people start to learn about asbestos back in the day, that it probably wasn't the most healthy or safest thing to use, but it was the cheapest. So really kind of trying to think, once again, you're trying to think about those impacts and the total, the overall total life cycle of the project. And then finally, risk management. For sustainability folks, this might be a newer thing to think of. Basically, you're trying to understand, what could potentially go wrong. How can I attempt to stop something from going wrong? What decisions do I need to do? And ultimately, what's going to happen if it does go wrong? So you're probably thinking, why is he including this? Well, once again, it lends very nicely to that whole system idea of understanding what your risks are. So if you think back to the white roof versus the black roof, if your choices are, say you've decided you're going with a membrane roof and you're in the southern Atlantic of the United States, and the white roof is 5 cents more per square foot than the black roof, it's kind of thinking about, okay, I know that it's going to get hotter here. The climate change is saying that we're going to go up. So like in Maryland, we're going, it's pretty much an accepted fact, 3 degrees Fahrenheit by 2021. And that's on the lower end. So it's trying to think of what could those cost impacts be in 10 years. Will that extra 5 cents today actually pay off in the long run? And then how that ties into different policies and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. While that might be more at the national scale, some of us are coming from flagship universities that are sometimes utilized as test beds for the local, for the state legislatures to see how well something works or doesn't work. So I know I keep beating a dead horse, but I'm really trying to get people to talk about kind of systems thinking and what that all means. So back to the base case, I really just quickly summarized here what we did. If you'll notice, the roofs actually did change color now, and 2 roofs got replaced to that light gray, and we had upgraded lights, upgraded HVAC, fixed some envelopes, and then kind of looking at that total cost of ownership, you put in the cool roofs. Okay, so on just the hyper campus scale, maybe you've increased your efficiency even 3 months out of the year. But if you're in an urban area like I am in Baltimore, if all your roofs go white, you're actually helping to reduce the urban heat island effect, which has an impact on your neighbors and ultimately the region. You've reduced some energy. If you went from a built up to a membrane, hopefully you've reduced maintenance. And membrane is typically less expensive to get rid of than built up. LEDs, you've definitely reduced your energy costs. You more than likely reduce your maintenance costs because an LED lasts much longer. And if you get rid of all of your fluorescence on campus, you no longer have mercury in your light bulbs, at least in the bulbs themselves. So you no longer have to send out universal waste for light bulbs, or if one breaks, it's no longer hazardous waste because it's an LED. And then high efficiency HVAC, you get improved comfort, you've reduced the energy costs. And if you can have happy students and professors while also using less energy and putting out less emissions, it's a win-win for everybody. So in this base case, I tried to hammer home that example of thinking about future plans and usage. Because remember, we have that academic building B where we didn't do much to it because it's eventually going away. So we tried to account for what the future might look like. We tried to consider what's going to happen when the roof needs to be replaced at those new buildings that got the white roofs or cool roofs. And then the risk is preparing for the impacts of more frequent and intense heat. So that's primarily the roofs, but if all your chillers and HVAC equipment are working to the best of their ability efficiently, hopefully you can maybe buy yourself a little extra time if you're in a brownout and get a little more out of your gen sets. And then that reduction of hazardous materials, whether that be the mercury in the lights or lead paint, even it could be lead in pipes, or asbestos, all those things, just trying to think about the immediate impact and then kind of the overall impact years down the road and beyond just the boundary of one's campus. So as promised, I now would like to just quickly go through a real life example of sustainability and facilities folks, and actually some faculty as well, teaming up in the Baltimore area. So last year, Maryland passed a House bill, which is an organics waste ban, and it requires certain institutions and universities fall under it that have 2 tons of organic waste a week or more. It can no longer go to the landfill. It has to go to an organic waste recovery facility. That could be an anaerobic digester, or that could be compost. Right now in the state of Maryland, only 5 facilities are in operation that'll take food waste. And if I remember correctly, I think 3 of them are limited to, you have to be a resident of that county. So at UMBC, we send ours approximately 47 miles away, because that is the nearest location for organic waste. I have some other folks in the area who actually are having to send theirs to Delaware because there's no organic waste facility in Baltimore, and there's nothing close. So what we have in Baltimore, we're actually very lucky. We have this thing called Baltimore College Town, and there's several institutions of higher education in the Baltimore area, and they each have kind of little subgroups. So for the sustainability subgroup, it's called Because. It's just a play on words. And we're also very lucky in that one of our members is very involved with the Kirk College and University Recycling Coalition. That's Miss Lena Hauser at Johns Hopkins, and her information's down there. She can tell you a lot more about this project than I can. But she spearheaded all of the colleges in the area. So for those of you not familiar, you have a couple of University of Maryland campuses. You have Johns Hopkins, you have Loyola, you have Dowcher, you have, I don't even know off the top of my head how many different community colleges, but you have county and then Baltimore City community colleges. We have a teaching medical hospital. We have a lot of kind of higher education in this area. So we all got together, the sustainability people and the facilities people, and we quantified what our organic waste was. And we're not all doing it at the same rate. So at UMBC, we do pretty much back of the house composting, a little bit of opportunity for post-consumer composting. Some of the other universities in the area, they have compost in like every building, and even their outdoor receptacles have an opportunity for organic waste. So it's really understanding what everybody's doing. And usually waste falls under facilities. So facilities helped us quantify not only what we're doing, but then they worked with the sustainability folks to understand what our potential is to do. So all of us got together. Lena put out, I think it was a Google form, and we just dropped in what we're doing and what we actually do and what we think we could do. And we got together with some of the local communities in the city and the director of public works, and also Baltimore City has a sustainability coordinator, a whole office actually. We got together with them as well. And we start to discuss it, say, look, you know, there are all these institutions that would send our organic waste to something in the city because it's closer. And if it's closer, our hauling costs go down. And the community was excited because there's a lot of vacant land or abandoned buildings that could easily be turned into an industrial facility that could create some jobs and also make some of the neighborhoods look a lot nicer. So we got together with DPW and we said, you know, we're fairly confident just from higher education alone, all of us would be able to get X amount of tons of organic waste to this facility. And then you got to think about all your restaurants that apply. We have 2 professional sports teams. They would apply. We have casinos, they would apply. So trying to help everybody understand that, you know, it's here, we just need somebody to build it. And part of the issue, and it's ongoing, is the investors are still not totally convinced that there's enough of a desire to have that facility for it to actually be profitable. So these are all the things we're talking about. And to kind of layer on top of it, the reason why it's so important that we have communities involved is Baltimore in the 90s built a waste incinerator. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of environmental justice concerns and a lot of the community wasn't involved. So we're trying to get community members involved to really champion this, and so that they understand that an organic waste facility hopefully is very low impact on them. Once again, though, please, if you're interested in learning more, and I got her permission, she's expecting emails, contact Lena, her information's right there. She can tell you a whole lot more. This is kind of her baby and her brainchild. And as promised, I got us to a point where we can open it up for open discussion. Oops, stop share.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I have learned so much from this presentation, and it really is the first step for Campus's lab projects to speak the same language as the people you're hoping to work with. At this time, I'd love to open it up to any questions that anyone has. You can feel free to raise your hand in the participants list, or just unmute yourself, shout it out. You can also drop any questions you have in the chat. So first, just to confirm, is the payback measure in years?
Yes, in that case, it was simple payback. That's an easy one.
I can kick off with the question here. Ryan, based on your experiences working on both sides of the house, facilities and sustainability, what would you say has been your biggest learning over time to create successful collaborations with facilities and sustainability departments?
It was really what I was trying to hammer home and kind of understand some of the facilities lingo. When I first started in the world of sustainability, I remember being in a meeting, and the reason why I put VAV in here is somebody said VAV, and I had no clue what that was. And after the meeting, I went home and Googled it and learned what it was. And for those of you interested, APA does a fabulous job of helping educate folks on this kind of stuff. But it's really just kind of understanding what the goals are and really being able to align what your sustainability goals are with what your facilities goals are. Because at the end of the day, I don't know of any facilities management department that wants to frack on the quad. Usually we're all on the same team and hopefully shooting for the same thing. I know sometimes it might not seem that way, but ultimately at the end of the day, we're trying to provide a safe and clean environment for the students and the employees. And if you're too shy to ask a question on here, you can also email me, guys.
Hey, Ryan. I put this in the chat, but I also wanted to ask if there are specific trainings you would recommend. I have looked at APA's Institute for Facilities Management. I know that they've got 4 different sessions for that, and they've got one for energy, but with COVID and just everything, I haven't been able to pursue that. But I was curious about the training that you've done. Again, as somebody who doesn't have an engineering facilities background, whether you have any recommendations.
So the way APA works, it's kind of similarly a structure to ASHE, which most of us are familiar with. So APA splits up into regions. I know you're in Wisconsin now, so I don't know what theirs is. But your Wisconsin region, it might be called like WAPA. So Virginia's VAPA, for instance, or VAPA. And if you're really lucky, they'll actually have scholarships available. So my training is I'm a certified educational facilities professional through APA or CEFP. And that's done online. It's an online study guide, and there's, I believe, 4 online modules that you take, and it runs through the whole gamut. And as a sustainability person, it's kind of nice because there's a whole module on sustainability and you can just like skip it. But there's other stuff where you learn about more of the nitty gritty, but it also talks about leadership and management and insurance and risk. So that's a good place to look. And once again, find out your school more than likely is already a member of APA, and find out what your regional kind of division is, and see if they offer any scholarships. APA does conferences just like ASHE. The state APA usually does a conference or a get together. There's another organization called COA, I think it's construction owners and administrators, maybe. I've done a little bit with COA. I'm not as familiar with them, but they seem to have good modules. They're definitely aimed at the project manager or the architect, but they're starting to get in and branch out to sustainability ideas as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, I believe Peter had his hand raised first.
Oh, I didn't even see the hands. Thank you for paying attention.
Yeah, hey, thank you very much, Ryan, for doing this. This was really informative. I work at Penn State in our Sustainability Institute, and I also have served in local government, and so I also really appreciate the wisdom in this, because people who do work in local government also end up doing paying an awful lot of attention to their facilities and the physical plant of a municipality or a school district. And so one of the things that I just really always encourage people to participate in democracy and to run for local government. And one of the ways that you can learn about some of these things is by running for office and then having to be responsible for physical plants. And you learn in this, it's a little more haphazard in some ways, but you end up having to do it in a really awesome and kind of compelling way that makes you responsible to citizens and taxpayers. So, it's not this abstract, well, there's those people over there in physical plant, like you end up being responsible for it. And the National Center for Education Statistics, about 15 years or so ago, I can find the document, did something on facilities management for schools. And I do think it's rather applicable to higher education institutes as well. So that was maybe more of a comment than a question, but I thought that might be of use to some people. Thank you again.
Thank you. That excellent point. A lot of it does translate very nicely to other sectors. I don't know. I see Christoph has his hand up. He's first in my box.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks, Ryan. Really appreciated your presentation, particularly the whole systems perspective and digging into some of the life cycle assessments. I think that's really essential and where sustainability is starting to shift now. So I really appreciate that. My question is really less about, the different elements of, facilities, deferred maintenance, life cycle cost assessment, all of that, and more kind of back on the campus as a lab. And I'm just curious from, thank you for sharing that case study, but I'm curious from your experience on your campus. And I'm from the University of Washington, Seattle. So we're kind of in the early stages of standing up a campus as a lab program. And we're trying to figure out, should this be managed strictly from our sustainability office and have a point person in our sustainability office, or should there also be a facilities point person for campus as a lab projects? And then, maybe the third element is, some of these stickier, more complex kind of questions of, maybe it's beyond the campus collaborations. Maybe there's also need to collaborate with, city, county, state stakeholders as well. But so on your campus, are you sort of the point person for campus to lab projects, or is there a facilities person who does that, or is that mainly something that happens in the sustainability office there?
So I'm in the sustainability office, which is in facilities. I'm very fortunate in that we have a whole planning office also in facilities, and they champion and have been champions of a lot of stuff. I came to UMBC at the end of 2019, and obviously we all know where the last 2 years have been. However, we're beginning the process of redoing our master plan. We're mandated by the state to do it new one every 10 years, but do like an update every 5. So next year we're starting our master plan update, and there's a lot of talk about facilities actually bringing in the campus as a lab model and applying it across the board. I'm also fortunate that UMBC has a long history of it. Permeable asphalt was researched, and we have some of the original test squares at one of our older parking lots. So we've kind of used our campus as a lab for many, many years, but really trying to expand that and ingrain it into everybody's thought process. And to really answer your question, I don't think there's a right or wrong approach. It's whatever is going to work best for your campus structure and your stakeholders. Sorry, that's not what you wanted to hear. Jessica, you're next on the screen.
Hi, thanks. So how do you empower facilities staff to bring forward solutions and ideas? So I'm also sustainability in facilities. I get the systems thinking. It makes sense to me. When I sort of propose it to others, very traditional thinking facilities staff, it just is dead in the water. Even when I propose, pairing your longer term ROI projects with your shorter term to get a more digestible return on investment project, just doesn't go anywhere. So how do you really work with staff so that they can start to be some of the ones to put forward some of the ideas and solutions? And also, I can't be an expert in all of these areas.
So really two approaches. I would start with your everyday staff. That is, your everyday HVAC mechanic or your everyday cleaner. And I would just ask them, what would make your life easier? And then you listen to what they have to say. And then it's kind of your job to ruminate on it and figure out how you can translate that potentially to an efficiency win. I know that's easier said than done, but I've always approached it, whereas if I can plant the seed and create a sense of ownership, there's usually less resistance. So if you've already got kind of the financial argument there, if you can get with your staff and figure out what some sticky points are, and how you can tie that together with efficiency and sustainability, you might be able to advance some stuff. And sometimes you're just going to have to wait for whoever is your blockade to retire. Sometimes people just aren't going to change their mind. And I haven't found a magic potion for that one yet. But usually if you can make their life easier, and you're willing to sit there and not tell them what to do or how to do it, but build the solution with them, usually that is able to create something. That's just my 2 cents. I'd be happy to chat with you more offline for specifics if you'd like. And then I see Maria's hand.
Yes, thank you. I'm calling from Dallas, Texas, and I'm part of Dallas College. It's a community college. Well, it was a system, now it's one. We have 70,000 plus students. And so we've been using the Living Lab in a broader sense. We've offered it to all types of faculty. So we've had speech faculty that have decided that, they wanted around Earth Day to plant tulips. So, we did that, or we did composting, or we did gardening. We did a sculpture with ceramic students. 200 students of ceramics did this mural of 8 by 14 feet of that moves and shows what sustainability is, the triple bottom line. So it's been broader. It's not so much facilities oriented because we don't have engineering. We're only an associate degree. And so my question to everyone on the call is, how do you get faculty excited? I'm on the academic side. I was the chief sustainability officer for one of our campuses, but now I'm in charge of special academic programs, and I'm interested in creating experiences outside the classroom so students get student engagement. How do you get enthusiasm and motivate faculty to join the Living Lab initiative?
I mean, I can tell you my approach. I try and identify what the faculty are interested in, and then whether or not it's the right thing or not, I then go and try and find grants that'll help us both advance. And usually if you tell a faculty member that you're willing to be the co-PI on something and do all the work for them, they are more than happy to then ride along with us. That's the approach I use. It's very similar to how I answered Jessica. How can I make your life easier? What can I do to enhance your curriculum, and also accomplish what my goals are?
Well, thanks everyone. We're right at an hour now. Ryan, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation, and thanks to all of you for your excellent questions. I'm pleased to announce quickly that we have our next webinar, which will be on February 10th. The title is Creating Meaningful Volunteer Opportunities for Students Online, featuring Samantha Casey from the University of Guelph and Taylor Buchanan from Humber College. So I'm not sure if Ryan has time to stay on. If anyone has any remaining questions, Laurelyn, Ryan, myself can be here for a few minutes if people want to follow up as after the call closes. So thanks again for your time, everyone, and take care, be well,